So my name is Bennett Foster. I'm the manager of Outreach and Employer Services with Georgia Commute Options. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, where we're going to hear about commuter programs from organizations that have earned this year's GCO Changemakers Award. Now, before we get started, I just want to run through a few housekeeping tips. Everyone will be placed on mute during the presentation. And after each presenter speaks, we'll take a few questions, and then we'll have time at the end for any last second remaining burning questions that you'd like to ask. Now, next slide. For those unfamiliar with Georgia Commute Options, we're a program funded through GDOT and managed by the Atlanta Regional Commission. Our main goal is to reduce the number of single occupancy vehicles on Metro Atlanta's roads. And we do this by working with employers like yourselves, commuters, and schools. We provide free customized worksite assistance, telework consulting, ride matching services, and incentives to change commute behavior. Now, if you're here today and you need our services, at the end, we're sending out a survey, and we'd be happy to connect with you after the webinar. Next slide. So, who are these changemakers? And what is this award? Well, the Changemaker Award honors Metro Atlanta employers who've demonstrated excellence in developing commuting programs that cut traffic congestion and improve air quality. These employers faced unique challenges at the onset of the pandemic, and they worked with GCO to develop programs that kept their employees engaged and connected. They went the extra mile to invest in community and flexible work programs that met their employees' needs. So feel free to hit the little hand clap button here on Zoom if you're so inclined, and join me in congratulating the City of Powder Springs, the CDC, and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. So, they need to add that to Zoom, a little sound effects for applause. Next slide. All right. And like I said, I want to stop talking because the most important people are the panelists who have joined us, taking time out of their busy schedules. And the first one is going to be Pam Connor, the city manager of Powder Springs. So when the pandemic forced most people to work remotely 2 years ago, almost, Powder Springs kept its staff safe and responsive to its 15,000 plus citizens and 650 businesses. Powder Springs worked with GCO to build a telework framework, and now they have plans to expand their options to more members of the workforce moving forward. Pam, who you can see here on camera, she's worked with the city for almost 22 years and has been city manager for the last 8. Pam began her illustrious career with the Powder Springs, first serving as the city's special projects coordinator. She eventually became planning manager and then community development director before being appointed city manager. Pam graduated from the Leadership class of 2020 and served on the Workforce and Economic Development Committee for this year's class. She's also a proud member of Powder Springs Youth Foundation. So Pam, without further ado, please come on up and share your story with us.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation to be here and to offer the opportunity to share some comments. I'm really proud to be associated with this illustrious group of panelists, so thank you for that opportunity. So who of you, if you go to the first slide, who of you has used the term doesn't take a rocket scientist, or it's not rocket science? You've either heard it or used it. I know I have. And telework, in fact, did take a rocket scientist to start this opportunity, this program over 50 years ago. Next slide. Just to kind of reiterate some of the information that was shared briefly about Powder Springs, I just want to let you know we are a small city, the second smallest in Cobb County, about 16,000 in population. We're in Southwest Cobb, 13 miles west of Marietta, about 26 miles west of the city of Atlanta. We have 80 approved positions, but only about 68 of those are occupied right now, employee positions. We're having a hard time, as most people are, with filling those positions because of the labor shortage. And so the telework option really is something that we're using as a human capital management tool to attract and retain employees. Our tagline there, inspired, invigorated, and innovative, is our vision. We're inspired by the past, trying to preserve and respect the past while at the same time embracing the growth and the development that is necessary and that we want in our community. And as a small city, it becomes a little bit of a challenge to deal with some of the complex issues that we have. They're the same complex issues that face larger jurisdictions. And so the being invigorated by the second part of that vision, being invigorated by our current circumstances and being able to require or adjust and adapt to the changing circumstances that faced us in the last couple of years. And it's always going to face us. Everything's going to happen. You know, all the unexpected is going to happen every day, and you've got to be able to adjust and be agile and respond to that. So being invigorated by it instead of being negative about it, and then being innovative about the future. And certainly the having the innovation of a telework program is a value to us and something that we've put in place and have worked on the last couple of years, and will become a permanent part of our program for employees going forward. Next slide. So as I mentioned, Jack Niels was the one who thought of or was credited with thinking about and offering telecommuting as an option over 50 years ago. And he is a physicist, so he is a rocket scientist, and he in his career working with different organizations before he went to the University of Southern California. And during that time when he was in Los Angeles, he noticed of course, the traffic congested that existed at that time. And he got to the office and was seeing employees coming in and getting on the telephone. And when they got to their desk and making calls to other employees who were going through that same daily commute. And he said, why can't you do this at home? It will save on miles traveled. It will help our environment. It will put savings to the employee as well as to the company by reducing overhead. And it's been a minute since I've read the article that he did back in the 90s, but he did actually do a study and did prove that it did in fact reduce miles traveled. There were a number of individuals who kind of scoff at that, and including myself, not so much the miles traveled, but just being reluctant to utilize that as an opportunity, not thinking that it could work. And my familiarity with this program with teleworking and telecommuting is really recent. And it's really interesting to me that this has been around for a really long time and that we've been able to put to use really well in the last couple of years. Next slide. So our experience with telecommuting really started before the pandemic. We had a couple of employees who were interested in doing telework. And so we did allow the directors to have the opportunity to telework one day a week. And we had not expanded it beyond that level until we were forced to do so during the pandemic crisis. In that situation, we didn't have a choice. It was not a voluntary program. It was mandated. It was mandated at the suggestion and by myself, and the concurrence by the mayor and council have been very supportive through this process, because our first and primary goal was to take care of the health and safety of our employees, as well as the public that we were trying to serve. And we had to adjust and provide those services and come up with some way to do that. I attended a webinar virtually that the Atlanta Regional Commission had offered on teleworking, telecommuting, and that was my introduction to Georgia Commute options. They worked with us for over a year in putting our program in place. They had interviews with our employees about the program and then reviewed what we had and helped us prepare a telework agreement that we could use with our employees. We continued that process throughout this entire time. At the end of 2021, I had intended to bring everyone back into the office in January, just to kind of separate the mandated required telework necessity because of COVID, and then actually having a program that we could, that was voluntary, that we could apply for, that we could embrace as on a long-term basis. Of course, Omicron occurred, and that delayed that opportunity to have that reset. But we did do that in February. We brought everyone back in February, and then with the idea that we would go through that voluntary application process for the individuals who wanted to participate. There are some that did not want to participate, and they didn't want to participate at the extent that we had. We were requiring most people to be at home 3 and 4 days a week so that we limited the number of people in the office. So what I decided to do was bring the directors, allow them to go back to what we had before the pandemic, having a day a week to telework, and then we would have the other employees have the option to apply. And we'll have that in place starting in April is the plan. The future, it is going to be a permanent part of our process. It's part of the telework or options of flexible work that we want to be able to offer as an incentive to employees. Next slide. As I mentioned, the staff had an opportunity to provide input, both the teleworker and the telemanager. We did speak with and solicited feedback from those employees who did not have the option to telework. And really, we didn't have a lot of concern or pushback from them because they understood the nature of their position. It was incapable of doing that. However, some of those that you might think, couldn't, like our CID, our investigations in the police department, well, they actually could do some of their work from home. And so it was expanded to include them as well. As I mentioned, the council supported us completely in our efforts to provide telework and to keep our employees safe. They're very supportive of everything that we're trying to do to address the desires and the needs of the employees. That's critical in order to have in place, because if your council didn't support that, it wouldn't be a successful program. Next slide. Some of the items that are necessary that have to be in place for successful telework. Obviously, you need to have the IT infrastructure and the equipment in place. We were very fortunate that we had a lot of that in place already. We had virtual office environments. We were working from the cloud anyway. And we also, all the directors had laptops or iPads. And so what we did is we deployed the laptops that were available from the police department from open positions to the other employees who needed to be in that telework environment. And then until we could replace those with additionally purchased laptops, which is what we did. We also supplied MiFis to some individuals who had some connectivity issues at home by working at home. The other things that are important are the performance measures and then the role and the individual employee. Performance measures is probably one of the areas that is the most challenging, as well as selecting the employee or who's eligible to do that. By their very nature, most of the jobs that we have cannot do that, whether it's public safety or sanitation, that field work, they don't have that opportunity unless it's some administrative things that they would have to do in the office. That is an opportunity where they could be at home to do that administrative work. But the individual also has to be able to manage their time, obviously, work with little supervision and have that initiative. And it's important to have those benchmarks so that you have something quantifiable that you can look at and to know that you're being productive and meeting the needs of the community. Unlike private organizations, we have to be available to the public. And so it's something that when we were in the heart of the telework during COVID, it was a bit of a challenge because we were trying to keep the numbers down to keep people out of the office and to provide that coverage in the office while we were trying to meet the needs of the residents was sometimes a challenge, but we were able to do it by being innovative, meeting people outside and helping them in that fashion. Obviously having our phones transferred to our personal number so that we could answer them and be available on a regular basis. Next slide. So obviously some of the benefits that all of you who telework are familiar with, it does allow us to recruit talent and attract the type of employees that we want, and to keep the employees that have been here for a long time that we don't want to lose. That institutional knowledge is hugely important. I have an employee that it would be extremely difficult to backfill if we had to replace her. And I can tell you in doing employee roadmaps with with our employees. I met with her recently and had asked her, what is something that's important to you and keeping you here, or what would entice you to leave? And she mentioned the telework. She said, I don't want to be in the car that often or that long. It saves me a lot of time. It saves me money on gas. I can run and have lunch with my children and be back, in the time that it takes to can still do my job. And that's hugely important to me. So recruiting the talent and attracting those performers is extremely important to us as a city, since we struggle in finding those positions. Also being able to deal with anything that comes our way, being flexible, being able to address the customer and provide the operations that they are looking for, that they are expecting in the payment of their taxes to us. And then there's obviously a savings to the employee, the commuter, by saving that commuting time, by saving on gas, as we're all now experiencing, and also increasing the productivity, which helps our costs and helps reduce our overhead as well. Next slide. Of course, there are risks, and some of the risks are the acceptance, the continued acceptance by the public and the council. And frankly, as long as the work is getting done and the production, they can see that, and there are few complaints, I don't anticipate that acceptance is going to go away. I think that it will remain, but we have to be vigilant and key in addressing and being available whenever they're looking for it. Another risk is the collaboration that employees have with each other by being able to run into them in the hallway and running ideas. Just the social interaction. We all need that human interaction. So that's a risk associated with a telework program if it's not well managed and not put in place with a good solid framework. Burnout is also a risk. Some employees can't or have a difficult time separating work from their life, and so sometimes they'll start in the morning and have worked all these hours before they realize that they really needed to take a step away from the computer and the virtual work they're doing. And then, who doesn't get tired sometimes of doing one Zoom call after another? But so that's a risk. But if you can manage that by just really with time management and thinking through the day and structuring the meetings in a particular way that you are minimizing it and only using it was necessary, is a way that you can address that. And there's a way that we have addressed that. Next slide. Some of the key issues that we're working on right now are finalizing those benchmarks. Again, that's been the most challenging, the performance standards and the benchmarks, because there's nothing, local government service is not as easily quantifiable as some other jobs and occupations. But we have found a way to address many of them. And so we're finalizing those. Those are things we'll complete in the near term, because we do want this program back up and running in April as a solid program, as a benefit that we're offering people, not as something that we find necessary to do because we're facing a crisis. The other thing that we do on a regular basis is the training for the safety and security of the system. Cybersecurity is an issue for everyone. And so we do a lot of training with phishing and other things to keep us safe. One of the other things that we have done, I should mention, is the equipment that has been provided. It's all city supplied equipment. It is not something that we don't allow them to use their own equipment. It is something that's supplied by the city, and that's important, and we'll continue doing that. We're also looking at other ways, other software and other technology tools. As I mentioned, we're in the virtual office environment, and that actually enabled us to be agile at the very beginning of this program. But it's also when you're trying to go back and forth between the office environment and your Zoom meetings or even your team meetings, in a separate environment, you have to toggle back and forth. And so it becomes kind of frustrating to the employees. And so we're looking at improving that and using other tools within the next 6 months. Long term, interestingly, so we're building a new city hall, and we talked a long time about the space needs that we needed in that city hall. What space do we really have to have? What does it mean to be prepared for the future? And really what we came down to is being prepared for the future is having the space safe, that if you are in the environment, in the office location, you do have that separation and you have the ability to be separate and apart, but it's not all you don't have to have all the offices that you once had. We don't have to have everyone in the office every day. So we really don't need to have and think about long-term having a lot of developed space. We can utilize the space that we have and make it more safe, whether it's the air ventilation or just the layout of the open areas itself. So that's something that we took into consideration as we helped design that project. And then we're continuing to look for opportunities to have that connection with our residents. When we put licensing and permitting online in the cloud, that made it easier for them too. And really, we've seen more connection with our public over the last 2 years than we did before. And it is because of the technology in that environment. And we're all doing it from home. Today is a good example. I've had several Zoom meetings, several conference calls, and I did them from a variety of locations because my meetings were at different areas around the county. And then in anticipation of other issues and in preparation for a conference tomorrow, I headed on up to Athens, pulled over and had a Zoom meeting in a Dunkin' Donuts, just because of the Wi-Fi availability. And that allowed me to continue to do my work, serve the community that I'm serving, but in a way that was allowed me to take care of the other needs that I had. The next slide. So the environment that we're going to have, the telework is here to stay. I resisted it at the very beginning. I fully embrace it now. I see the benefits to it. Most of our employees travel from a greater distance. They don't live close by. And by allowing them the opportunity to work from home, that helps them, provides them a great work-life balance. And it helps us it still helps us be efficient, but it also having an in-person environment is extremely important to those individuals in the community who it's their expectation and it's their right to be able to drop by City Hall and have their questions answered or get the assistance they need. So we have to have that hybrid. And so it won't be a remote environment, a remote work environment, but it will be a strong telework environment that we will continue and expand on. I've also had requests to take that to the next level and look at having a 4-day work week and not 4 10-hour days, a 4-day work week. Not sure how that will be received, but my council is very open to different ideas and being flexible with our staff, because we know that's one way that we can keep them and one way that we can attract them. So where telework is a good program for us. I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to work with Georgia Commute Options to put that in place. And that concludes my presentation and all the thoughts that I have to share, and look forward to answering any questions later. Thank you.
Hi, Pam. Thank you, Pam, so much. That was great. We do have a question. How many of your employees, of the 68 or so, are eligible to work from home? And how many days per week can they work from home?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that COVID and then post-COVID, what we're going to do going forward. So we have 68 positions. 33 of those are eligible, and 33 of those did, in fact, outside of public safety and sanitation, that did take advantage of that. We also had a couple of individuals within the public safety department that took advantage of it. So that would increase that number to about 36, so about half and half. The patrol officers obviously cannot, and the sanitation employees cannot, but other administrative individuals within those departments can. And if any of those field individuals have administrative work, they would be eligible. They just have to demonstrate how they're going to serve the customer and meet the needs of our constituents. Was there a second part to that I did not answer?
Just and how many days per week?
Okay, so ideally what I want to get to is during COVID, everyone was out probably 3 and sometimes 4, because I limited the number of people in the building. And so that forced everyone to be at home. I think the ideal situation for us will be that I'm planning to put in place, or that I'm behind in trying to get the directors to help me develop those performance, those benchmarks, is to allow them to be at home 3 days a week and 2 days in the office. And if it all works great and we have enough coverage to address the person dropping in, I'm willing to entertain 4 days, but we have to have at least a day or two in the office.
Right. Yeah. And this will, I'm going to ask everyone at the end about workplace culture, because that's something also big coming out of this with hybrid. So Pam, if you could stick around for the end. And that's workplace culture, something that was brought up in the Business Chronicle today as well. So Pam, thank you so much. Scott, next we have Scott Kemp from the CDC. I'm going to let Scott tell you all about this program. I'm not going to go into the background on the CDC, but I do want to tell you about Scott before he jumps on. Scott supports the CDC's Operational Health Clinic's response to COVID-19. He graduated from Leadership DeKalb in 2017 and Leadership Government in 2019. He represents CDC at the Clifton Corridor Transportation Management Association, as well as the Clifton Community Partnership. He received a Green Gov Presidential Award in 2016 for his efforts in the electric vehicle charging arena. And I also want to share that Scott served 20 years in active duty with the Marines, with 2 tours in both Iraq and Afghanistan. So thank you, Scott, for your service. And thank you so much for being here to share a bit about your program at the CDC. So Scott, take it away.
Thank you, Bennett, for that wonderful introduction. When I was discussing what to talk about during this panel discussion with the GCO folks, one of the things that they mentioned was a description of CDC's employee base. And what I mean by that is my participation in Georgia Commute Options and Clifton Corridor Partnership and Transportation Management is not based on our public health mission, which perhaps some of you have heard of in the last 2 years or so, but it's more as an employer. We have 12,000 employees in the Metro Atlanta area, both in federally owned spaces and leased spaces. And my job is to help those employees, which are full-time employees, contract employees, et cetera, commute back and forth in the most efficient, cost-effective, and cleanest way. So when you hear me talk about what we as CDC support as far as commuter, in the commuter environment, it is not a statement that CDC thinks X transportation is better than Y transportation. We're just talking about a commuter. Again, we do have 2 federally spaces. One is the main campus that most people refer to as the Emory campus. The history behind that is fascinating, and if anybody wants to know, please contact me. And then we have another federally owned campus on Buford Highway in Chamblee. We have 3 leased spaces up and down the I-85 corridor that, frankly, one of the things we're trying to do based on what we've learned during the pandemic is reduce our leased spaces and move as many employees as we can onto our federally owned spaces. It's back to the whole concept of it's better to own than rent. Our leased spaces do not have any lab facilities on them. Those are limited to our federally owned installations. Go ahead and hit the next slide if you would. Okay, so as a federal entity, we have a federal transit subsidy. Any of your employees, any employees that you know of that work for the federal government, there's a very, very positive, very lucrative is not the right word, very expansive policy that if you are a federal employee, you receive up to $280 a month to commute in a green, clean way. Now, here in CDC, we talk about congestion, we talk about people getting off the road, but the federal impetus behind this is to try to green and clean the commute of the federal employees. So the greenest and cleanest commutes of all are teleworking. but not everybody at the CDC can telework. Nobody on this phone call wants our laboratorians to deal with bad diseases in their bathtub. So some people have to come to the office. People like myself who are in kind of an admin support role, we can work from home. The federal transit subsidy covers mass transit, van pool, and I'll talk about the bike to work thing in the future. Mass transit, this is a national policy. So we're from Hawaii to Maine, Alaska to Florida. If you take mass transit, we can help you subsidize that cost. You have to ride mass transit or bicycle, I'll talk about that later, more than 50% of the time you come to work. What's been really interesting in the last, COVID has shrunk time. So 2 years is like 2 months. But even before COVID, if you telework, that time is taken off the top of your computation. So if you telework twice a week, then the federal transit subsidy will cover you for the 3 days per week that you come in. If you come in 1.5 days, 2 days, etc., you can get the federal transit subsidy. It covers, in Seattle, I went to school, University of Washington, go Huskies. In Seattle, it covers ferries, covers trains of either local commuting or on the West Coast, the not bullet trains, but the long distance trains. Van pools. We in CDC had, before COVID, about 56 or 57 van pools. Van pools have between 4 and infinity, about between 4 and 9 or 10 participants. And as long as the participants rode those van pools to their office spaces 50% of the time, they could get their van pool costs covered. Of our transit subsidy, the largest expense were the van pools because some of those get a little pricey, but up to $280 per person, you can cover your van pools. Now, it's interesting thing about the van pool is you get to ride in the hot lanes, you get to ride in the HOV lanes, that kind of thing. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, commuter advocacy. The reason I said next slide is I'm going to get the bikes in a second. Transit shuttles. We at CDC determined, 4 years ago, that we could get our employees to a heavy rail station, MARTA station, and get them to either Lindbergh or Chambly. But getting them from Lindbergh or Chambly to the Roybal campus or the Chambly campus was problematic. So we established a federally funded shuttle. CDC employees can ride from their origin to either the Lindbergh or the Chambly station and then get on a CDC funded shuttle that takes them actually onto the campuses. It doesn't close that first mile, but it closes that second mile. CCTMA, we fought long and hard to become an actual member of the Clifton Quarter Transportation Management Association. So we have the ability to impact transit studies, light studies, that sort of thing across the Clifton corridor. And a portion of that is the desire to have light rail slash bus rail transit to the Clifton corridor area to service CDC and Emory. And the last thing is bicycles. If you ride a bike to work at one of our CDC campuses, not only will we give you $20 a month to upkeep your bicycle, but we will give you a locker on our campuses, because I don't know about you, but I would love to work next to somebody who biked to work, took a shower, put on real clothes, and came to their office. So that's the CDC commuter advocacy, everything from transit shuttles to the CCTMA to bike lockers. Next slide, please. That is really all I had. I'm hoping to answer as many questions as you might have later in the conversation, but If you have a specific question for me, my email at CDC is ywp1 Yankee Whiskey Papa 1 at cdc.gov. And I'd be happy to answer any commuter related questions. Please do not send me mask related or vaccine. That's a different agency. So thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you, Scott. And we'll drop your, if it's okay, we'll put your email in the chat as well so everyone has it. And then I think we'll have some questions at the end. But we will next we'll talk to Scott Webb. And Scott is joining us from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. He is the Senior Director of the HPE Point Next Services Global Remote Services Organization for North America and Latin America. He's very important. That's what that means. He's also the leader of HPE's Alpharetta site. And Scott's held a number of global and regional leadership positions with Hewlett-Packard and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise over his 29-year career service. And Scott is responsible for delivering best-in-class proactive, reactive technical services. And we are so happy to have you here, Scott. And just like with Scott Kemp, I don't want to take up any more time. I want to hear directly from you. So take it away, Scott.
Well, I appreciate that that warm welcome. I know you're looking at my video here of my face and you're like, only 29 years? Surely he's been there longer than that. But, you know, I actually made the joke yesterday. I started in the 4th grade in a co-op program. So I'm really not that old as, you know, being here 29 years, but it's been a great run with the company. In 1939, many of you may know the story, Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard, who were college friends, turned business partners. They created Silicon Valley in a rented garage in the city of Palo Alto. And they started with audio oscillators or oscilloscopes that they sold to Disney, was the very first customer that we had. They built the foundation for a company that would grow to be a global leader in technology. Today, we're a global edge to cloud company that's built to transform businesses. And we do that by connecting, protecting, analyzing, acting on data and applications. And with more than 80 years later now, since our founder started the company, our success really is exemplified through the more than 60,000 employees we have globally that advance the way people live and work. In our Alpharetta site, we can go to the next slide if you would. We have over 500 team members at the Alpharetta location. And those include organizations like Global Remote Services that I happen to lead. In the organization I lead, we've got around 1,600 people. Now that's in North America, but also Latin America. And also we do some delivery out of India as well. We have learning and development. We have a pre-sales organization. We have engineering. We have Aruba Business Unit, which is a networking company we bought a few years ago. We have global labs. We have an R&D organization for our services arm that we call Point Next, and then some account services where they're direct customer interfacing. We also have a solution center where the pre-sales have a proof of concept lab where we demonstrate to customers how an HPE solution would handle their workloads and their needs. We have an education lab. This is pretty cool, where they put on those like Google glasses and are able to deliver training and hands-on, so to speak, with equipment for customers who are located maybe around the globe. And then we have a full global lab there where we have at least one of most everything that we've ever made. And we use that from a support standpoint to recreate problems and issues to solve a customer problem. We also have an innovation lab where we demo a lot of what the solutions that we provide to our customers in customer visits. Next slide, if you would. And we as a company are committed to being a leader in both environmental and social progress. And we've earned a lot of recognitions that are listed on this slide for that. Again, we believe in work that fits your life. And the things that we do for our team members globally, but at the Alpharetta site in particular, is we have something called Wellness Fridays. That promotes overall health and well-being, and it gives opportunity for our team members to have one day a month where they can take time out for themselves to do anything that they want to do, and they're fully paid for that day. We also have something called Enhanced Family Leave. We're one of the few companies that I know of that provides a minimum of 6 months fully paid leave for both mothers and fathers after the birth or the adoption of a child. It's a beautiful thing. I can't say that I got to realize this benefit, but my daughter, who actually works for the company as well, we have a 2-year-old grandson, and she took full advantage of that 6 months off fully paid. So it was a great thing. We also have something called parental transition support for parents who want to return to work gradually. They can work part-time up to 36 months after they either have a child or adopt. And then retirement transition support for those people who are within 1 year of retiring. They can ease into retirement by going to a part-time schedule. And then lastly, a career reboot for job opportunities for folks who may have left the workforce for an extended period of time and want to do something totally different when they come back. Next slide. So we have transitioned, like I've heard Pam and Scott talk about, we've transitioned to a new working model as well due to COVID, where folks have the opportunity to work in 3 different ways. We have telework, we have edge to office, as we call it, where folks can come into the office 1 or 2 days a week, and then the rest of the time work remotely. And then we have dedicated office workers as well. But within that, one of the things we wanted to be able to do is to have a culture and to have innovative initiatives that would allow our team members through COVID to be able to work together. Those things are like coffee talks, spirit weeks, where we'll focus on a particular subject or a particular aspect, virtual activities, fun things, resource groups. We have things or groups that are focused on young employee network, Black employee network, and so on. We have something called the Culture Catalyst Network, where we determine some initiatives and some groups that want to focus on there to bring our team members together more closely, to work together and then engage those at the site and more broadly. We also utilize tools to be able to connect remotely, like Microsoft Teams and also Slack. And our physical spaces that we have, I mentioned we've got over, I think, 500 employees at the Alpharetta site right now. We call them team members. And if you come to the site, we want those to be collaboration and culture centers, where we have social space set up. We've got conference rooms. We don't have as many dedicated desks that we've had before. I heard Scott mention that the CDC's plan is to get out of lease space and move toward own space. Ours is opposite. HPE as a company globally is really getting out of the real estate business and signing long-term leases on sites. Just from the analysis is done from a cost perspective. And so due to COVID, we've leased back less site. And as we talked about the edge to office, we invite folks to come in 1 or 2 days a week. The rest of the time they can work at home. We don't need as many dedicated workstations and desks. And so we have more common areas for when we are in the office. And we like to schedule. Right now, we're in what we call phase 3, which is all sites within the US, including the Alpharetta site, are open. It's a volunteer basis to come in at this point. And we want to make sure that folks that do come in, they have the ability to schedule a desk, but we schedule teams like say you're on a particular team, your team day to come in might be Tuesday. That way we can take great advantage of coming into the site, not sitting at some random desk, not knowing who else on your team is there. We want to try to make it most advantageous for doing that. Okay, next slide. We talked about the challenges that we had through COVID, and we've learned a lot through this. And again, we've been working on our capacity plans for the better part of a year and a half. And again, as I mentioned, we're in phase 3. We want to make sure we're doing things that provide a very safe environment. So we, along with and Scott and his organization helped drive a lot of this with the CDC recommendations and the government recommendations and mandates. We are in alignment with those. So we want to make sure that we provide a safe environment when people come into the site with cleaning protocols, with masks where appropriate, and those kind of things based on those protocols. Okay, next slide. And real quickly, the numbers that are sharing on this slide here are a snapshot of the impact of 16 of our team members that regularly log their clean commutes, mostly teleworkers that we have through the GCO app. You can see the amount of reduced miles, gallons of gas been saved, and that's really pertinent for right now when it's $4 a gallon or close to it around the Atlanta area. And reduce CO and emissions. This has been done since March of 2020. Next slide. We also promote events like Biketober. That's our internal communications. So this is an example of internal communication we send out where people can register. And thanks to 4 primary team members that we have, Rich Lombardi, Terry Walker, and Terry Hutchings, and Phil Rake, they are the ones that helped us achieve second place when it came to Biketober on here. So we're very excited and thankful for those team members that we had. And last slide, we appreciate the partnership with Georgia Commute Options to develop a community to provide us with information around work initiatives. And we appreciate the recognition on here as a change maker. Our commitment is to continue to be an environmental social differentiator in our culture, in the world today. And we believe in solving for humanity with humanity. And we appreciate, again, the partnership. Thanks for your time. It's been an honor to be recognized and to be here today.
Thank you, Scott. And yeah, that was really cool. The edge to office model. You kind of segued right into our first question about workplace culture. I mentioned that Business Chronicle. Oh, we can bring in here. Let's see, Scott Kim. Oh, there you are. Okay. I was just looking for your videos. So yeah, in the Business Chronicle, they mention with now that we're shifting to they're calling it the hybrid era. Workplace culture is going to be essential. You have a defined edge to office model. Pam, I know that you talked about culture. And so when you're looking at culture, I'm curious, how are you measuring whether the culture is really making its way to your staff?
So I can start if okay. So we do something annually called the Voice of the Workforce Survey. So we want to seek feedback from all of our team members. And this is something that our company does globally, but we're able to take the results and look at it by site, by organizations, and those kind of things. And one of the key measures that we look at on here, we look at really two, I won't say two primary, but two critical measures. One is around people leader effectiveness index. So how effective are our people leaders? That's what we call managers. And then employee index or employee engagement index. How engaged are employees? And there's a number of questions that we ask in order to determine that. What we've seen at the Alpharetta site over the last 3 years is we've seen improvement in both areas. So we believe that the culture, our DNA, our beliefs, which are talked about in every session that we have with our CEO and senior leadership, is resonating with our people. I think they like the hybrid model, and that's what Pam mentioned. I think for the city there, we're doing the same. One size does not fit all. With office workers, with Edge, and also with dedicated teleworkers who never come into the office. They just work at home all the time. So I think we've got a good mixture from that, and it seems to be resonating with our team members.
Cool. And Pam, you
Sure.
work with-
We have started a dedicated group of employees that really started off kind of as a compensation committee is what we called it initially, where they're looking at, and the specific thing was to look at, initially was to look at adjustments in that could be made within their pay, depending upon the various things they brought to the table with certifications, what have you. But anyway, it's evolved into a more of a benefits type of opportunity for them to share what is it that's important, what is it, and as a representative of others, your coworkers. We have representatives from all the departments. We meet once a month to solicit that information and feedback from them. And we've implemented the things that they have suggested to the extent that our budget will permit us to do. And then continuing just to involve them in whether it's the development of our budget process, planning for employee appreciation days, which we got away from, of course, during COVID. We did not do those. We would have gatherings before, but having that opportunity for them to come together and collaborate with each other, have and make their suggestions and have those suggestions acted upon has really opened up a lot of dialogue with our staff. And there's a real focus on helping each other. We don't have these individual silo departments within our city. We have everyone, all of our teammates work together to figure out how is it that we can help each other, and how is it that we can help explain to the employees that aren't able to telework in a way that they understand their value and contribution to driving the mission that we have. So it's a very customer, as my HR director will describe, a very customer service focus within our organization. That's our culture of a high customer service, but not just to the public, but to each other, and being a support to each other. And, certainly even in the implementation and the use of the telework. That's a short answer or a long answer.
No, that was a great answer. And Scott? Oh, there you are.
I assume you mean Scott Kemp.
Yes, Mr. Kemp.
Okay, yes. So no, not Mr. Kemp. That makes me shudder. Okay, so I see the question there. Shielding employees from increased commuting costs.
Oh, yes, we can definitely jump to that question. It's simply with the fuel crisis. Is this going to, change how much telework you allow? It kind of sounds from all of yours, from all your presentations, that telework is going to be hybrid, is part of your models moving forward. And it's kind of like we stumbled into like a resilience or sustainability.
The federal government doesn't stumble in anything. We did incredible planning and ensured that we looked forward and leaned in. Okay, so HHS and CDC have come out and said, again, like I mentioned earlier, there are certain members of HHS and CDC that nobody wants to work at home. We don't want our BSL-4 folks to work at home. But the two big groups are going to be telework, which is 2 to 3 days per pay period, which is about a 2-week period of time, and then remote in area. So what the CDC is going to, under HHS direction, is somebody like my position is going to be remote in area, which means I'm probably going to work remotely, but when my boss needs me to come in, within 24 hours, I have to come in. So it's a balance between the union rules of you can't say somebody has to be there in the next 15 minutes to the concept of never make me come back in again. that is where we are going. We are implementing that right now across HHS. Health and Human Services is the cabinet position that owns CDC, National Institute for Health, Indian Health Services, FDA, all those sort of things. So what we're going to be doing in the near future is by the end of March, we will all know if we're required to come in and how much we're required to come in. And part of the telework is going to be protection and health of the employees, and just in general, reducing congestion and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I could talk forever, but I feel like I need to stop.
No, that was great. And Pam, we had someone ask, how does the city manage leave for employees who cannot telework? In theory, employees working from home may use "quote unquote" leave without reporting.
Well, that's a very tough question, and actually something that the senior management has discussed frequently over the last couple of years. What we did during COVID, and it's not something that we can continue going forward because of budget reasons. But what we did during that time was allowed those employees in public works and public safety to accrue a certain level of vacation, additional vacation, as an offset or as a perk, and then we purchased that vacation. And that was something that the council agreed or thought was important and would continue to do as long as the budget could support it. And so there's so that's one thing that we would continue to look to do if the budget can support it. Honestly, some of it also comes down to just a certain level of trust that that's not going on. I mean, you've got to be able to release some of that and trust that that's not going on, but it also comes with the responsibility of managing the work that is going on. And you can look and see, if certain permits are being issued or if the analysis is being done on a zoning action. So there's certain things that you can look at, but there has to be a certain amount of trust. But if we can do anything additional on the others subject to budget, we would. But there's also an understanding, this is what I'm saying with the other committee members, having them understand their job doesn't allow them to do that. We would offer it to them. And, but if we're monitoring everyone and we're fulfilling our responsibilities, that taking advantage of that leave is probably not happening to the extent that maybe we might fear.
Yeah, it comes down to trust and performance measures that are new performance measures sometimes that are established in this new hybrid era.
Right.
We're pushing up on 3 o'clock. I'd love to ask this last question though. It's about data and how to use data to support your commuter program or your hybrid program, and what has been the most helpful data to collect. And I'd love to hear from each of you. Mr. Webb, Scott, would you like to go first?
Yeah, no, I can go first. So yeah, we definitely take a look at the data in regards to who's coming in. I think now with COVID, since we all kind of got a reset, and we had, some what we'll call office workers who are dedicated to office that came in all through COVID. Once we got to the point we could open the office back up, at least for what we call essential employees. So since then, we've been doing an analysis of the data to understand, what do we need to do as far as programs and phases moving forward. But I think now that we're getting back into the place where we're truly open the office back up, on right now voluntary basis, I think we are at a point where we can analyze the data better to understand from the commute standpoint, what are we seeing? Because I think that we've had a reset, whether we like it or not, with what's happened through COVID. And I think it's a great opportunity for data analysis to really determine, do we stay on the track that we're on, or do we change what we're doing?
Scott, you want to take the next one?
Absolutely. One of the requirements we've had during the entire time of COVID is employee accountability. We've been required to report to our bosses and our bosses' bosses where federal employees have been working. And that provides a significant amount of data to, in my mind, counter the concept that's been prevalent, to my opinion, in the federal government, that unless I can see somebody, they're not working. And I think what's really been helpful about collecting the employment data is throughout the pandemic, we've continued to meet our mission. And in meeting our mission, X percentage of our people have worked from home. So your general argument that unless I as a manager can see my people, they're not working, is a facile argument now. We have the 2 years of data to prove that missions have still been met, projects have still been accomplished, and we can still continue to move forward with the telework process. And that, I think, has been the most impactful use of data over the last 2 years.
And just briefly, I would echo that we do a report on projects completed, number of applications processed, what have you, all the different things that each of the departments do. They report on that on a monthly basis, and all of those employees are working from home to a certain, whether it's 1 day or 4 days during the pandemic. So that has been the most helpful, and it's allayed the concerns, frankly, that council may have had, which they never really expressed, but that gave them information that they could then share with any constituent who might ask.
And Pam, if I could add to that, in a positive way, it allays their concern, but in a directive way, it gives us the data to contradict those middle level managers who say, I cannot complete my projects unless my people are standing at their desk. Well, that's not true, because for the last 2 years, you've completed your project. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's very positive, but at the same time, for those folks who are saying, we can't possibly do this, well, actually you can and have.
That's right, because you actually have.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Scott and Pam. One of the things that we track very closely in the support organization is the voice of our customer. How do you feel when a case is placed, and how did we work on it? How did we do? And we provide, a survey to every customer interaction that we have. I can tell you that through COVID, even though all of our people from the services perspective have been working remotely and working from home for the most part, the results have been outstanding and as good as what we had when everyone was in the office. So I hear what you're saying, Scott. I think there's an argument to be made both ways. We've proven that we can be successful and do this remotely in a remote world.
Yep. Yeah, it seems like a hybrid era is here, but it's also about retention, employee retention. Now it sounds like it's about some energy, some resiliency for the environment and the economy. And also, Scott, I just want to point out, you posted those GCO metrics. It is about improving air quality, at least for the GCO program. Peak hour commutes are changing. We're continuing to monitor that, and we're going to continue to support all of our partners like yourselves and folks on the call. And I just want to thank all of you for being here, and congratulations for being changemakers. On behalf of Georgia Commute Options, thank you all for your time today. For the attendees, please stick around and take our very short survey. And if you'd like to connect, we'd love to connect with you and provide any of the services that the panelists spoke about.
And
so,
Bennett, you mentioned earlier about providing
Scott.
our email address.
Oh,
Send it
yes.
out there. Send it to whomever.
Okie dokie.
Love to hear from the people.
Yep,
All right,
completely
awesome.
agree.
All right, thank you. And so I think the survey will come out. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. I'm really glad we recorded this. You all had some really, really great gems in there too. So thank you very much.
Thank you,
All
Bennett.
right.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you all.
Yep, thank you again.